The vanishing of the kindergarten class. They were only between the ages of 4 and 5 years old. 10 children, smiling, laughing, wearing tiny backpacks with cartoon characters, and packed lunches from home. It was supposed to be just a field trip, a day to explore nature, to chase butterflies, and to learn about trees. But by the time the sun set, not a single child returned. No footprints, no sounds, no clues, just an empty school bus abandoned. At the trailhead, doors wide open as if someone or something had taken them. For weeks, search teams combed the forest. Dogs, drones, hundreds of volunteers. But it was like the earth had swallowed them whole. The forest gave nothing back. Until today. A hiker deep off trail spotted something caught high in a tree. A child's backpack, pink, faded, and torn, hanging like a ghost between the branches. The name tag still intact. Ellie Ramirez. Nearby, the ground opened into a silent clearing. No birds, no wind, just silence. The kind that presses on your ears. In that clearing were 7 pairs of shoes. Small, clean, lined up in a perfect curve like they'd been placed there by someone who wanted them to be seen. And in the center, a circle of sticks woven tightly, almost like a nest with markings that no one could explain. The hiker stood frozen, and then a soft giggle. Not playful, wrong, distorted, faint, but close. And for the first time since the class vanished, the forest whispered back. Brookfield Academy was the kind of school that rarely made the news. A quiet, well-kept private kindergarten tucked at the edge of a sleepy New England town. It had been around for over 40 years, founded by a retired teacher who believed children learn best when surrounded by calm, by nature, and by people who genuinely cared. It served no more than 50 students each year with small classes, bright classrooms, and an air of quiet predictability. Everyone in town trusted Brookfield. On May 4, 2010, it was a clear Tuesday morning when Miss Danielle Wells, the lead teacher for the Buttercup class, stood outside the school's arched entrance, holding a clipboard and checking names off the list. 10 kindergartners, all present. Their tiny backpacks bounced as they lined up, full of juice boxes, hand wipes, extra socks, and peanut butter sandwiches. Beside Miss Wells was Mr. Gregory Hensley, a soft-spoken science teacher who had taken classes on outdoor excursions to Larkwood Nature Preserve more times than anyone could count. And with them was a volunteer parent, Gina Matz, mother to one of the little girls, Anna. Larkwood was only a 40-minute drive away, a sprawling forested parkland used by schools for nature walks and by birdwatchers for quiet observation. It wasn't wild exactly, not in a dangerous sense. It had marked trails, maps, and a small ranger station at the main entrance. The plan was simple. A 2-mile loop along the Willow Ridge Trail, a picnic by the creek, and a lesson on tree identification. The parents had been sent permission slips. The kids were buzzing with excitement. No one had any reason to worry. By 9:20 a.m., the small school bus pulled away from the Brookfield parking lot and headed toward the preserve. The weather couldn't have been better. Mid-60s, breezy, with sunlight dappling through the trees as they arrived. They checked in at the trailhead where Mr. Hensley signed the guest book with his usual neat script. Brookfield Academy, Buttercup class. They started into the woods just before 10 a.m. Miss Wells carried a whistle and first aid kit, and Mr. Hensley held the folded paper map and wore a compass clipped to his vest. He'd walked this trail dozens of times. He knew the way. About 20 minutes into the hike, the cell signals vanished. That wasn't unusual. It was mentioned in the field trip guide. Deep inside the preserve, reception dropped off completely, especially along the creek valley. They weren't worried. They had maps and Mr. Hensley's confidence. He knew every split in the trail. He'd been coming here since he was a teenager. By noon, the group should have finished lunch near the creek, but they never arrived. Number 1 at the preserve noticed anything unusual. It wasn't crowded that day. Another group from a local middle school recalled hearing laughter on the trail, maybe some singing, but nothing alarming. There were no screams, no cries for help. Just a soft hush of leaves in the wind. By 3:30 p.m., when the bus didn't return, the school called both teachers' phones straight to voicemail. Parents waiting in the pickup lane began to murmur, then panic. At 4:10 p.m., the school called the local authorities. By 4:45 p.m., a ranger was dispatched to search the Willow Ridge Trail. He found nothing. By dusk, the trailhead was surrounded by flashing lights. Officers from the sheriff's department, search and rescue teams, and volunteers combed the area with dogs, helicopters, and thermal scanners. They found no sign of struggle, no scattered belongings, no dropped backpacks or broken branches. It was as if the woods had swallowed the class whole. The only thing left behind was the guest book entry, a line of tidy handwriting stating they'd entered, but no signature showing they ever came out. And so began the mystery that would paralyze the town for months, drawing national headlines, and igniting every parent's worst nightmare. A simple field trip, a trusted teacher, 10 children, gone without a trace. It was supposed to be a simple field trip, the kind every school planned at least once a year. Bright-colored backpacks, trail maps printed in bulk, juice boxes packed alongside peanut butter sandwiches. The destination, Larkwood Nature Preserve, a modest patch of woods an hour from the city, known for its safe trails and scenic views. The kindergarten class arrived. Just after 9 a.m., 2 yellow buses easing to a stop in the dirt parking lot. Children tumbled out laughing, clutching each other's hands. By noon, the group had reached a small clearing surrounded by pines. That's where they stopped for lunch. The children sat in circles pulling out sandwiches, juice, and apple slices. Some shared, others whined about crusts. The teachers chatted while keeping half an eye on the group. It was an ordinary scene. Then they reached the fork. 2 trails split ahead. One marked as part of the loop, the other narrower and unmaintained. The signage had been vandalized. The arrows defaced. Mr. Hensley offered to walk up the lesser path just a few meters to double-check which was correct. Miss Wells agreed. "Be quick," she said, adjusting the hat on one of the little girls. "We'll wait right here." It took him 5 minutes, maybe 6. The trail twisted more than expected, but he didn't go far. When he was satisfied it wasn't the right path, he turned around and headed back to the group. The clearing was silent. At first, he thought it was a prank. The kids are hiding behind trees, and Miss Wells is playing along. But when he called out once, then twice, nothing answered back. His voice sounded strange, swallowed by the woods. A cold sweat crept down his back. The lunches were still there. Half-eaten sandwiches, juice boxes punctured with straws. A few backpacks lay on the ground. A couple of jackets were tossed over a log, one with the sleeves inside out. There was no sign of struggle. No footprints rushing in any direction. Just a kind of quiet that didn't belong. He shouted again, louder. Walked the perimeter. Number. Giggles, no rustling, not even a breeze. The clearing felt wrong. By 1 p.m., Mr. Hensley was running, his breath tight, legs sore from slipping over roots. He made it back to the ranger station by 1:30 p.m., barely coherent. By 2:15 p.m., local police had been alerted. By 3 p.m., the woods were swarming with search and rescue. They combed the forest in lines. They used dogs, drones, night vision, helicopters. By nightfall, nothing. No children, no teachers, not even Miss Wells' scarf, which had been red and woolen and easy to spot. At 6 p.m., the sun dipped behind the trees. The air turned colder. The sound of leaves crunching under. Boots became louder than anything else. The search crews kept moving, their calls growing hoarse, but even they could sense it, that the forest wasn't just empty. It was hiding something, and whatever it was, had taken 10 children and left no trace. The search began the moment the First frantic call reached local authorities. A kindergarten class, 10 children and 1 adult, had not returned from their scheduled field trip to Larkwood Nature Preserve. What was supposed to be a short hike through a clearly marked trail had now spiraled into a chilling mystery. Within the hour, the preserve was locked down. By sundown, the largest search operation in the county's history was underway. Volunteers from nearby towns poured in, joining hands with forest rangers and police, forming lines, moving in sync, and calling out names that echoed back unanswered. Every path, creek bed, and cave mouth was combed with urgency. But the deeper they searched, the more unsettling the silence became. On the second day, searchers came across the first clue. A paper drawing caught in the branches of a shrub fluttered faintly in the wind, then another and another. A trail of crayon-colored sketches, sunshine, smiling stick figures, trees, birds. Each one damp but intact, leading further into the woods. They were spaced unevenly, some lying in the dirt, others snagged by roots or bark. They looked like they had been dropped on purpose. 3 days in, muddy terrain near the western ravine revealed something else. Footprints. Tiny ones, unmistakably. Children's, scattered and close together. They led across a shallow creek, up a slope, and into a clearing. But then, without warning, they simply stopped. No return prints, no adult tracks, just silence. Searchers stood there, baffled, studying the ground, the trees, and the sky, looking for some sign of what could make a group of children vanish mid-step. The next clue was found a day later. A torn-up backpack resting near the edge of a ravine. It belonged to Miss Wells, the kindergarten teacher. The contents were scattered: a juice box, a broken pair of glasses, and a roll call sheet with the first few names smudged and unreadable. But there was no blood, no clothing, no sign of a fall or struggle. Just a bag sitting there like someone had carefully placed it for them to find. The forest was closing in around the search effort. More and more whispers replaced updates. The official line remained hopeful, but people could feel it, that creeping unease, that something was deeply wrong. The woods had grown strange, too quiet. Radios sometimes cut out when teams moved too far from the base. Dogs would bark at empty shadows and refuse to go forward. Veterans of past search and rescue missions began to request reassignment. Theories began to circulate, first in hushed conversations, then more openly. Some said it had to be a large-scale abduction, a coordinated human effort, but others pushed back. How could someone take an entire class without a trace? Others spoke of the cave systems beneath Larkwood, unmapped tunnels, hidden crevices. Could the class have fallen through into something deep underground? But why hadn't anyone heard screaming? Why no sound at all? And then there were the darker rumors. Locals spoke of the woods as cursed, an old legend of something ancient beneath the ground. A presence, something that didn't like being disturbed. They said people had vanished in that forest before, just not this many, and never this young. Official search went on for weeks. Every morning, teams went out. Every night, they came back with nothing. The search for the missing kindergarten class had stretched on for 7 weeks. But each day seemed to bring more frustration than answers. The initial optimism of finding the children alive had faded, and with it the belief that anyone would be found at all. The area had been scoured thoroughly, the woods combed for any trace, but there had been no signs, no footprints, no wreckage, nothing to explain the disappearance. The media had moved on to the next story. People had started to forget, but not the search teams. They were still out there, still trying, still hoping. Then one day, a break came when a hiker stumbled upon something out of place. Hidden in a remote part of the woods, deep within the dense underbrush, the hiker found a strange indentation in the earth, a sinkhole barely visible to the naked eye, almost as if it had been waiting to be discovered. A call was made, and soon, a new search crew was on its way to the site. At first, The location appeared to be nothing more than a small depression in the ground. But as they dug deeper, the mystery only grew more unsettling. They found a narrow passage leading down, hidden beneath thick roots and vines. It was so well camouflaged that it was easy to miss unless someone had been looking for it. The moment the search team descended into the darkness, they were struck by the eerie atmosphere. The walls of the hole were smooth, unnatural. It felt like something had been carved out. And the more they explored, the more they uncovered. It wasn't just a sinkhole. It was an underground chamber, a place that had clearly been altered, though no one knew who had done it. In the deepest part of the cave, they found scraps of fabric, small pieces of brightly colored clothing, the unmistakable remnants of the children's uniforms. Toys were scattered around, some crushed underfoot, others abandoned in haste. Most disturbing of all were the handprints on the stone walls, smeared with something darker than dirt. The prints were too small to be those of adults, but they were smeared in a frantic manner, as though whoever had left them had been desperate to escape something, or perhaps to reach something. There were no bodies. There was no sign of the children or their teacher, but the evidence of life underground was undeniable. Someone, perhaps several of them, had been down there for a long time. The air in the cave felt stale and stagnant, as though it had been undisturbed for weeks, if not months. The news of the discovery sent shockwaves through the community. What had happened to the children? How had they ended up there, hidden underground? Theories exploded, each one darker than the last. Was there a hidden cult operating in the area? A secret group that had abducted the children for some unknown, sinister purpose? Was it possible that the sinkhole had been used as a place to hide them, with a network of tunnels beneath the earth where they could be kept away from the world? Or was the mystery even older? Had the area once been home to an abandoned mine long forgotten by the locals? Could the children have stumbled upon it during their field trip, accidentally discovering a place no one had been to in years? Maybe they had wandered too far, fallen into the shaft, and gotten lost in the tunnels beneath the woods. The possibilities seemed endless, but the most chilling theory involved Mr. Hensley, the teacher who had taken the children on the trip, and after they all went missing, he was nowhere to be found. Some whispered that he might have been involved in their disappearance. It was hard to ignore the questions surrounding his behavior before the trip. Rumors of him being distant, of his odd behavior in the days leading up to the field trip. Could he have been involved in something more nefarious? The authorities, overwhelmed with the discovery and the pressure to solve the case, began to consider each possibility. Investigators questioned Mr. Hensley's whereabouts, his alibi, and whether he had any ties to the area, but without solid evidence to point in any one direction. The theories continued to multiply. In the weeks that followed, there were even reports of strange sightings near the site. People claimed to have seen figures moving in the trees at night, whispering voices carried on the wind. Others swore they heard children's laughter echoing from the woods. But when they investigated, there was nothing there, only the silence of the dark forest. As the investigation deepened, the authorities were left with more questions than answers. Had the children been taken? Had they been trapped there on purpose? Or was it just an unfortunate accident? And what role, if any, did Mr. Hensley play in their disappearance? With the strange discovery in the woods, it was clear the search for answers was far from over, and the mystery of the missing kindergarten class was only just beginning to unfold. Investigation into the disappearance of the kindergarten class had reached a critical point. The case was now cold, with little progress. Police, still desperate to find some clue, began to dig into Mr. Hensley's past, trying to uncover anything that could explain the mysterious disappearance. They discovered a chilling connection that had been overlooked before. Years earlier, Hensley had been linked to a survivalist commune that lived deep in the woods. The commune was known for its secretive nature, living off the grid in remote caves away from society. Members of the commune had a reputation for being reclusive, obsessed with independence, and fiercely protective of their way of life. This discovery set off alarm bells for the investigators. Hensley had been involved with this group during a period in his life when he had seemed to disappear from the public eye. But why had he kept this part of his past hidden? The police were now convinced that something much darker had occurred. They dug deeper into Hensley's life, and the more they uncovered, the clearer it became that he was more than just a teacher who had lost his class. There were rumors that the commune Hensley had once been part of was not entirely dissolved, that some of its members still lived off the grid in the remote caves of the region. But what could this have to do with the children? Was the park ranger some sort of ruse to lure them into the wilderness? Then one day, a tip came in. An anonymous caller claimed to know where the children were. The police followed the lead, navigating deep into the forest to a secluded area they had never explored. What they found there was beyond anything they had expected. Hidden in the woods was a cavern sealed off with large wooden boards, deliberately placed to keep it from being discovered. The entrance was almost invisible, covered by years of underbrush and vines. As they removed the boards and cautiously entered, the air inside the cavern was thick with dust, but something else lingered, something unsettling. The walls were covered in children's drawings. The drawings were crude, but unmistakable, depicting life underground. They showed children playing, eating, and waiting for rescue. There were sketches of trees and fields, but most of the images were of caves and tunnels, as if the children had been trapped down there for an eternity. Some of the artwork was recent, the ink still fresh on the walls, while others seemed older, faded, but still hauntingly clear. As the officers examined the drawings, a sinking feeling spread through them. These were the drawings of the missing children. The place they had been kept, the place they had been waiting for someone to come and save them, was right beneath their feet. And that meant that Mr. Hensley, who had once been linked to the commune, was likely involved in something far more sinister than anyone had imagined. Before the police could piece together the full picture, a final shocking discovery was made. Hensley, the man who had once been thought to be the only one who knew the truth, had vanished. He was nowhere to be found. His disappearance was swift and calculated, as if he knew the walls were closing in. All they had were his past ties to the commune and the unsettling knowledge that he had never been alone in the woods that day. The truth was finally starting to unfold. But there were still more questions than answers. Where were the children now? Had they been kept there the whole time, or were they somewhere else? Lost to the world. And most chilling of all, who or what had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes? The investigation was far from over. But one thing was certain. The woods held secrets far darker than anyone could have imagined. The emotional aftermath hit the town like a wave. Parents, once hopeful and optimistic, were now consumed with grief. The faces of the children were everywhere, on posters, on missing person reports, on the news. But those faces remained only memories. The reality that their children were gone began to set in, leaving behind a raw, aching emptiness. Every night, parents held quiet memorials at home, lighting candles for the children they no longer held. They clung to the smallest remnants of their little ones, pieces of art from school, favorite toys left behind. One father placed a small toy car on the porch, a final offering to his son who had loved to race it across the kitchen floor. A mother stood in front of her daughter's empty room, staring at the untouched bed and the soft doll sitting on the shelf, gathering dust. Without bodies to mourn, the community had nothing tangible to grieve. But the pain of loss was real, and it was felt in every corner of Larkwood. The air was thick with the weight of it all. The local media, ever hungry for a story, turned the disappearance into something of a legend. They called them the children of Larkwood Preserve. It became a tragic tale of innocence lost, a mystery that no one could explain. For some, the children were angels. For others, they were victims of something more sinister. The press painted pictures of them as ethereal, lost forever in the woods, their spirits haunting the preserve. A vigil was held every week with candles flickering in the soft evening breeze. And at the center of it all, one simple gesture began to emerge as the town's symbol of mourning. Outside the school, a pair of shoes was placed for each child. A single empty shoe for each of the missing. Some were tiny, like those of a toddler just learning to walk, while others were a little bigger, sneakers well worn from play. Each pair was tied neatly and placed gently on the sidewalk. A heartbreaking reminder of the children who should have been running, playing, and laughing, not lost in the woods. The shoes became a ritual. Each parent, in their own grief, added a pair to the line that grew longer by the day. They were placed with reverence, with tears and hopes that their missing child would somehow see them, feel them, and know they were still loved. As the days turned to weeks, the town began to accept the uncomfortable truth. The children, their lives, and their futures had been taken, stolen by something unseen, something no one could fight. The memorials continued, a silent testament to what was lost. But with each day that passed, the hope that the children would return faded, leaving only the emptiness behind. It had been an entire year since the heartbreaking disappearance of the kindergarten class during what was supposed to be a simple field trip. The children and a teacher had vanished without a trace while visiting a nearby nature preserve. The van they had traveled in was found abandoned in the woods. Doors wide open, personal belongings scattered carelessly around. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints leading anywhere. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. The search efforts that followed were intense. Helicopters hovered over the vast forests. Search teams combed every inch of the area and sniffer dogs were brought in, but no evidence ever surfaced. For weeks the town held out hope. But as days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months, the trail grew colder and colder. Nothing more was found, and the case quickly turned from one of hope to one of despair. The authorities had no answers, and the families of the missing children were left in agony, wondering what had happened to their loved ones. The town, once filled with sympathy and concern, grew quieter as time passed. The mystery of the missing kindergarten class seemed destined to remain unsolved forever. Then, just as the town was starting to forget, a note surfaced. A new construction worker clearing debris for a new project near the same stretch of woods stumbled upon another hollow tree. Inside, once again, was a crumpled note written in crayon, barely legible. The same haunting message appeared. "We're still here. Please find us." The authorities, stunned, immediately launched another search. But once again, nothing was found. No signs of the missing children, no new evidence, no explanation. And so the mystery remained. No one knew what happened to the children. And the notes offered no answers, only more questions. Had the children somehow survived in the woods for all this time? Or was something darker at play? Something far more sinister than anyone could imagine. The families of the missing children were left with nothing but those two cryptic messages. The authorities were no closer to finding the truth. And the town, once filled with hope, was now steeped in uncertainty. But who was responsible? What happened to the children? And why, after all this time, had no one found them? Stay tuned for the next part of this story. Perhaps, just maybe, the truth will finally come to light. Will the person behind the disappearances be caught? Could there be a light at the end of the tunnel? Only time will tell.